getting to me. Lost my money playing poker. I had to leave. Ain't it going back to living that whole life no more. Oh, so rock me, mama, like a wagon. Rock me, mama, anywhere you be. Yeah, mama, rock me. Oh, rock me, mama, like the wind and the rain. Rock me, mama, like a southbound train. Yeah, mama, rock me.
Yesterday, a child came out to wander, caught a dragonfly inside a jar. Fearful when the sky was full of thunder, and tearful at the falling of a star. And the seasons, they go round and round, and the pains and ponies go up and down. We're captive on a carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came, and go round and round and round in the circle again.
She'll let you in her house if you come knocking late at night. She'll let you in her mouth if the words you say are right. If you pay the price, she'll let you deep inside. But there's a secret garden she hides. She'll let you in her car to go driving around. She'll let you into the parts of herself that'll bring you down. She'll let you in her heart if you got a hammer and a vise, but into the secret garden, don't think twice. You've gone a million miles. How far'd you get? That place where you can't remember and you can't forget. She'll lead you down the path. There'll be tenderness in the air. She'll let you come just far enough so you.
Many's the time I've been mistaken, and many times confused. Yes, and I've often felt forsaken, and certainly misused. Oh, but I'm alright, I'm alright, just weary to my bones. Still, you don't expect to be bright so far away from home, so far away from home. I don't know a soul who's not been battered. I don't have a friend who feels at ease. I don't know a dream that's not been shattered or driven to its knees. Oh, but it's alright, it's alright, for we lived so well so long. Still, when I think of the road we're traveling on, I wonder what's gone wrong. I can't help it, I wonder what's gone wrong. And I dreamed I was dying. I dreamed that my soul rose unexpectedly, and looking back down at me, smiled reassuringly. And I dreamed I was flying, and high up above, my eyes could clearly see the Statue of Liberty sailing away to sea. And I dreamed I was flying. Or we come on the ship they call the Mayflower. We come on the ship that sails the moon. We come in the age's most uncertain hours and sing an American tune. Oh, and it's alright, it's alright, it's alright. You can't be forever blessed. Still, tomorrow's gonna be another working day, and I'm trying to get some rest. That's all I'm trying, to get some rest.
Took my love, took it down. I climbed a mountain and I turned around, and I saw my reflection in snow-covered hills, till the landslide brought me down. Oh, mirror in the sky, what is love? Can the child within my heart rise above? Can I sail through the changing ocean tides? Can I handle the seasons of my life? Time makes you bolder, even children get older, and I'm getting older too. you see my reflection in the snow-covered hills where the landslide bring it down, and if you see my reflection in the snow-covered hills where the landslide bring it down, oh, the landslide bring it down.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Eder and the Longo families, I wish to welcome you to this celebration of life for Michele Longo Eder. My name is Peter Phones. Before she died, Michele and Bob asked me to help lead this celebration of her life. Some of you here today I know quite well. Some of you may wonder, who is this guy? My wife, Leah, and I have known Michele for more than 40 years. I'd been an Oregon State Police detective, among other things. And after my retirement, I had a different call and followed a long and interesting path to be an ordained Episcopal priest, which is actually why I'm so honored to be here. That despite Michele's deeply conflicted feelings about both law enforcement and organized religion, you might think I would be the last person that she would ask to do this here today. But that's kind of who Michele was, woman of great intellect, who loved a challenging debate, who could and did cross boundaries in the spirit of love and friendship. There's a phrase familiar to many that come from an ancient wisdom tradition, which says simply, we are all just walking each other home. It is like that here today, with this community of family and friends gathered here to walk with one another as we honor and remember Michele's life among us. Michele had specifically requested that Asher Khan Farewell be played by Kimberly Fitch at this occasion. Kimberly is a former member of the Newport Symphony and family friend, and she will perform this piece.
I got to know Michele and Bob as their homestay guest when they were supporters of the Newport Symphony beginning in around 2010, 11, I think is when I got the gig and started coming up to the coast and spending some long weekends with Bob and Michele. It was such a treat to get to know them and to spend this time with Michele. Something clicked when we got to know each other. We were all very comfortable together, and maybe it was the giant waffles that she made and the Sunday bacon and all. She was just so warm and welcoming, and it made me feel like I was at home and a kid again, to be honest. Michele reminded me a few months ago that when they would come to the concerts, they would always make sure I could see them and we would wave at each other. They were the goofy parents out there, proud to see me up there. I took it as a good sign when I met my husband, Garrett, that he was also born on the 4th of July. And I never dreamed at that time I would be a mom of two little boys. Here, the things that Bob would say, talking about being a dad of two little toddlers. Now, here I am for Michele, and I'm having this experience that I think she would have given anything to have with the little ones. This piece, the Ashokan Farewell, is known as a Scottish lament by a Jewish guy from the Bronx. His name is Jay Unger. Without further ado, I will play this piece.
Katie Jacobson. I'm a family friend. Oh, we're not on. There we go. I'm Katie Jacobson. I'm a family friend of the Eders and was asked to help facilitate the open mic session of the program today. The family really wants everyone to feel comfortable in sharing, as they would love to hear your stories of Michele. They also wanted me to say that it's okay if you come up here and don't say anything at all. And for those of you that maybe aren't public speakers, on the back of the program, there's a place where you can send emails, letters or cards of your stories of Michele later on, or maybe as you think of something after today's program. Michele also did give some instructions on how she wanted this open mic to go. And part of those instructions were that she didn't want a lot of dead space. And she also didn't want the mic to be passed around in the audience. She wanted people to come down. So we have two speaking stations, this one and that one, set up for the open mic. And to kind of limit that dead space that she didn't want, we have chairs on either side So that as one person is speaking, hopefully other people will come down and kind of be on deck, pun intended, ready to speak the next time. So I'm going to share a couple of stories from Michele and myself, and maybe people will feel comfortable coming down and being ready to share. So Michele has been a friend of mine for a really long time. And what I appreciated about her was that she wasn't always an easy friend. And you all know that too, obviously. And what I mean by that is she would let you cry on her shoulder, and I have certainly done that. But at some point, she'd kind of say, stop crying, get your shit together, get to work, like enough of this. And I really love her for that, that tough love. She was fierce and she knew how to fight. And I think a lot of us in this room learned from her of how to have our voices. My favorite Michele story is from several years ago, back when we were all informed that our Coast Guard helicopter was going to be taken away. There was a public meeting, which many of us, including Michele, had to fight hard just to get the public meeting. There was hundreds of people that came. Everyone gave, great testimony, very compelling testimony. But Michele took it to an entirely new level. And I think that was a day where I was like, # I want to be like Michele. She went through the entire Coast Guard budget, all 1,000 plus pages of that document. And in that, she found that the Coast Guard was building a movie theater and a mall on one of their bases. So she went through the budget and basically rewrote it so that they had money by taking these things out to have a Coast Guard helicopter. I don't even think that our federal congressional staff had been through the budget and the way that Michele had. She also, I think, taught the community through that campaign social media warfare. She was like, you can friend the Coast Guard commander and start sending him messages. I don't think before this community realized like, oh, you can use social media to get your message across. So she has just always been a fierce friend, a fierce supporter of the fishing industry and the community at large. She certainly will be missed. And I hope many of you will feel comfortable sharing your stories today. And I do think we have our first speaker that's ready. So as Tonette comes up to speak, please, if you want to speak, come down and sit on the sides. Thank you.
This is going to be a little tough for me. It's been a while since I have been able to come up and speak in public, but I really felt that Michele was worth it. She deserved for everybody to understand what an impact she had in my bubble, in the women that she mentored, which I couldn't address how many women have come up to me and talked to me about how she changed their lives, how she gave them confidence, how she cheered them on, and how she disciplined them when they weren't doing what they needed to do. And most of that was just using their voice. She was all about women empowerment, and she thought women should be proud to be able to use their voice and to express what they needed, and especially in the fishing industry. It's a tough industry for women, and she was very good at not concerning herself what people thought about her, and concerning herself with what needed to be done. And there was and is still a lot to be done. And a lot of the women that are here today, she taught how to use their voice and how to continue what she started. And I will forever be thankful that I was one of those women. And hopefully I can give a smidge of what I learned from her to the women coming up. That is my goal. That should be, I think, a lot of our goals in life. Anyways, I am going to, I you know, Michele accomplished so much in her life. I'm going to read off some things. I knew that I couldn't wing it with her because there's so much, and especially with Newport Fishermen's Wives, which initially that's what I came up here to do, was just talk about all the things she accomplished in Fishermen's Wives. She was a part of Fishermen's Wives for decades, and she never even stopped when she left. She was the first person I called when I needed advice. She was on our social media up until a week before she passed. She really wanted to help us in every way she could. But there is no way I can stand up here and tell you all the accomplishments, all the things she did for our community, for Fishermen's Wives. So I thought instead I would focus on her relationships, because I think that the takeaway from everybody that had input was that they all had such diverse and strong relationships with Michele. If you were lucky enough to have her in your life, then you came away a better person. She really liked to challenge people, and she definitely challenged the powers to be in our group, and taught all of us to do that. So most of it's going to be read. There's a lot of women that contributed. I just asked some of the women that worked with her through Fishermen's Wives, and some just on the cusps of Fishermen's Wives that I knew had impacted her. So it might be a little long, but I'm going to read some of the stories from the women, or impressions that these women had of Michele, and a lot of them kind of go along the same line of just respect, intimidation at first, but then just love, a lot of love. She was a big cheerleader, a huge cheerleader for all of us. I guess first of all, I want to talk just a short blurb about what I saw with Michele. Yeah, I know. Is that better? Okay. Sorry. I want to talk a little bit about what I saw, especially at the end with Michele. I saw her love for her family, especially her husband. I saw a beautiful relationship that also a lot of us wanted to emulate. There was a lot of love, and it was very apparent, and it was a beautiful thing. I also admired her love for her sons and her grandkids. They were definitely the love of her life. But if you look at the pictures, especially with her sons and her grandchildren, it just radiates love. You just see it. So I'm going to start with Katie. Katie gave me a little blurb. Michele was always so willing to battle for people. My coworker, Ruby, had her brother-in-law die in a shrimp accident in Westport, leaving Ruby's nephew, 4 at the time, an orphan. Mom had died previously. He went into foster care immediately following the death. Ruby was trying to get custody of them. They wouldn't emergency certify her to be a foster parent, would not move him out of the Clatsop County and state, and said it would take 6 years until a death certificate could be offered to take to be issued, meaning that she could not get custody for 6 years. I called Michele. She offered to take Ruby's case for free. All we really know is in less than 48 hours later, Ruby had her nephew out of a foster home in Clatsop in her home in Lincoln County as a foster parent. Michele had already, a few years before, changed the law to not require waiting 6 years for a death certificate if Coast Guard report says there were deaths. Michele educated the state in the law. Ruby had custody within 30 days of Coast Guard report. Michele never charged her a dime. The next one is Tia Rutherford. Being a young fisherman's wife, there were women who you would hear about, women who were like pioneers in the fishing industry. The stories of how they would come together and battle for the men and livelihoods. They would come together not only for the safety of the fleet, but as a sisterhood, lifting each other up in all aspects of life. In celebrations and tragedies, Michele was one of those women. My very first year of being a fisherman's wife, tragedy struck. My husband was the same age and friends with her son who was lost at sea. I always heard how, I watched as women surrounded her and decided I wanted to be a part of that. I always heard how amazing her freezer meals were for her crew. So I made freezer meals for my crew too. She was a role model for us young women starting out in this lifestyle. She was educated, loving, giving, and a force for the fishing industry. Getting to stand beside her while fighting for the Hilo was amazing. I'm so thankful to have had such an incredible woman to look up to. The next one is Flaxen. Michele and I laughed about this. I told her that when I met her, she scared the crap out of me. She was so intense, brilliant, and passionate about the commercial fishing families, businesses, and community. Luckily, I had the wherewithal to shut my mouth, listen, and learn from her. But Michele also valued my perspective, sharing that she early on recognized the value of the information that I shared regarding what the research said about whatever social or management issue we were addressing. Michele's was a magnificent life, and I'm so grateful for that, for all that Michele, Bob, Ben, and Dylan have shared with me. The next is Becky Wagner. She always helped with any legal advice we needed for Newport Fishermen's Wives. She was extremely knowledgeable and gave the best advice with terms we could understand. She was a leading force in our Save the Hilo campaign. She was so kind and loving and will truly be missed. The next is Deanne Barnhart. As a young fisherman, wife, and mom, she was a person that many of us referred to as iconic, if that makes sense, in the fishing family's world. Her name to me represented qualities that I wanted to see in myself: strong, courageous, and always willing to battle for the fishermen and families. When I was young and involved in Newport Fishermen's Wives, I got my hands on her book. I read the thing in 2 days, knowing my future was fishing. My own children would endure the life of a fishing family, and eventually our son would become a fisherman. Michele carried herself with a strength I never quite understood, and that came with the label of being a fisherman's wife. Until watching women who have lived this life for many years and all they endured, the strength she showed was amazing, and something I will hold on to as I continue to love this life as a wife and mother to fishermen. The next is Ginny Goblich. My heart hurts badly over her loss. She was such a unique person and helped me a lot over the years. As far as Newport Fishermen's Wives go, she served as our pro bono attorney, helping us with all the legal stuff and requirements for nonprofits, and connected us with the great attorney we had when we sued the Coast Guard over the helicopter. She was always ready to help families suffering loss, and with some of suffering loss, and with some of our special projects. She put together our last Newport Fishermen's Wives cookbook on her own, was a partner with her husband in the fishing industry. She handled all the legal and accounting stuff and sent out home-cooked meals for the crews on her boat. She spent a lot of time at fishery management meetings advocating for her family's fisheries and was a great advocate for the fishing vessel safety consideration in management decisions. She was also the go-to person when agency and political people wanted to meet with a person from the industry. She was a force of nature and is sorely missed. Noelle Yoakum. Michele was a great role model and an amazing ambassador for women in the fisheries. She was strong, smart, and thoughtful. She commanded respect. I was so inspired by her unapologetic strength and intelligence. I hope she knew how much she helped pave the way for all other women and how respected and appreciated she was. This is from Kelly Rutherford. Michele was born to be a leader, as she led so many of us women forward in the commercial fishing industry. She was my example that your voice mattered and passion would move us in the direction we should go. She was brilliant, bold, passionate, and a mover. I will miss her smile and her love. That was a reflection throughout this community and industry. Chris Carley. Here's a couple of great memories of my friend Michele. Early morning aerobics at the gym next door to Les Schwab, a good 100 years ago. Just met Michele and the loyal group who supported Patty, our instructor, 6 a.m. and again at 8 a.m. Michele was there. Not knowing her, I found her to be very enthusiastic, a very enthusiastic exerciser. She was always so positive and approached the class with such joy. Billy Joel songs were such a favorite, and she knew and sang all the words loudly, I might add. And now I still remember the words. Thank you, Em. Michele had exclamation marks, woohoos that were so invigorating and charming. Who knew this attorney, future Lincoln County judge, would be so real, so alive, and so friendly? As our friendship grew due to Newport Fishermen's Wives, she was bound to be admired by all of us. She was the most beautiful and thoughtful person who never flaunted her accomplishments and therefore was such an inspiring person. I remember when during an aerobics class a year or two in, Michele aspired to play tennis. She hadn't really played the game much, but was willing to join the Salishan Tennis Club. What? Well, that is Michele. Try it, do it, accomplish it, and have fun. The absolute favorite memory of this new endeavor of hers was when I asked why. And she answered, because I love the white tennis skirts outfits and I have great legs. And from what I understood, she was once again an amazing competitor. I am grateful to have been a friend always. When we would see each other, we would immediately catch up where we left off, even though our paths were so far apart. I believe this so true of all of Michele Longo Eder's long-lasting impacts with each of us here at this celebration for our dear, beloved, and missed friend. Connie Kennedy. I pretty much grew up in Newport Fishermen's Wives. At a time I was raising my children with my fisherman husband, and the women I met became friends with were all strong, independent women. Michele at the top of that list. She was a proud fisherman's wife to Bob and a mother to Ben and Dylan. Also a fierce advocate for her fisheries and industry. She worked tirelessly to put together and market the Newport Fishermen's Wives cookbook that is still in stores today, and wrote a food column for the News Times. My husband was a beneficiary of her Tupperware meals made for her boat. They rarely had time to cook then. when their sons, when their son Ben and crew was lost. We were in the U.S. Coast Guard station all day with the commander. At the end of that evening, Michele and Bob came up and said thank you. That really stuck with me. At their worst nightmare, that they came to do that. What grace. Heather Mann. When my daughter Hannah was born, the first bouquet that I received in the hospital was from Michele. While a lovely gift, of course, the significance of this to me was that my daughter was born on the 1-year anniversary of the death of Ben. To take the time to celebrate Hannah while in the throes of grief on that 1-year anniversary was deeply impactful to me, grace and grief intertwined. When both my children were still very young, I had a particularly bad day as a mom. I was questioning whether I could have a demanding career and be a good mother, and whether I was robbing my kids of the attention that they needed from me. Michele was defiant and clear. She said, as long as your child is fed and sheltered, at the end of the day, they know you love them, you are succeeding. I will never forget that advice, and I have delivered it to many young moms. Looking through the hundreds of emails I have from Michele, she always ended with some type of encouragement or something to make me smile. Here's a few of them. Anyway, go get them, cowgirl. Chew them up and spit them out. That was a dickhead report by them. Nasty. Glad you called them out. Thanks for sending. You provoke me. A compliment. Jesus, who know? Great pursuit on this. Might be the best hope yet. Thanks. You've done a fantastic job. Wowza. I knew because I could hear your voice in your writing. And by that, I mean your words and, drum roll please, mastery of a sentence structure. And this piece flows beautifully. Just shoot me, or as my mother used to say in moments of extreme exasperation, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Wow. Fantastic letter, Heather. Thank you. And the last one, love you. And I know you love me. I can feel it so deeply. Thank you, honey. All the women I spoke for today had the same thing in common. They felt privileged to have Michele in their life. We will all forever carry a deep respect and love for Michele. She was our friend, and she was our greatest mentor. My admiration for Michele started the moment I met her. She carried herself with such grace, confidence, and authority. There were times I found myself standing side by side with her and Sarah Scamser, and I felt so honored. I respected both of them so much, and like most, at first, I was intimidated. They were a force to be reckoned with, and they were also the dream team of mentors. Michele taught me that it was not only okay to have a strong voice, but in her eyes, it was a necessity. She was a role model in every way. I can't think of a long conversation with Michele that I did not come away better than I was before we spoke. So here's the hard part. I lost my son recently, 9 months ago. Michele reached out to me immediately and continued to reach out
She sent me letters, cards, messages until I was finally able to come out of isolation and meet with her. I now wish I could have come out earlier and had more time with her. She was at her worst. She was in pain, facing the end of her life. And still her energy was completely focused on me. Just sitting with Michele, who understood my crazy. She was the perfect example of a grieving mother that didn't let grief take her down. She gave me hope when I had none. And that was the biggest gift anyone could ever give me. I loved her.
So, I'm an old friend of Bob. Understandably, you can't speak. But I want to recognize the spirit and thank Michele for loving this family and caring about the boys and giving so much to them and to Jess, Dylan, August, and Mark. She really, really had a thing for you guys. And I'm not sure what Bob would say as his friend. I think it's enough to say thank you, Michele, for taking care of them.
I just decided to do this. When I was 7 years old, my appendix bursted and I got taken to the Lincoln City Hospital. I was in and out of consciousness after they had the operation to remove it. One of those times I woke up, there was a woman I'd never seen before standing over me with a white teddy bear. I named the teddy bear Marie. A year and a half later, she married my dad. My name is Gabrielle, and Michele was my stepmom. And I have my sister here, Courtney. I have a brother, Biff, and a brother, Josh. My son, and we all called her mom, or Michele. And my son and my sister's son called her Grandma Michele. And I know her for firsts. She took me to my first concert with Cyndi Lauper, the Eileen Schweitzer Concert Hall, 1985, I think. She wouldn't let me wear tinted chapstick until I was 13. And I had to fight her for it. She also wouldn't let me have my ears pierced until I was 12. And she took me. She bought me my first bra. We drove to Portland to Nordstrom's and we listened to Anne Murray all the way there and Carole King all the way back. Shadows in the Moonlight is our song. You might not know this, but she absolutely loved Mrs. Pac-Man. And whenever we go to an arcade, she would fight us to play it. We would drive to the little cherry stand, the fruit stand in Ground Round, and we would buy cherries. And then we would have a marathon of cherry pitting because if anyone knows her, you know she was a big pie baker. And we baked a lot of cherry pies. And it was a thing. I loved her so much. And she gave us new grandparents, Grandma Betty and Grandpa Joe. Grandpa Joe. And she gave us Uncle Mark and Marcel. And we went to New York with her and gave us the New York experience. And she gave us all those things, but that everyone has said, but as a child, integrity, honesty, strength. And as a child, learning those things from Michele, it's a real lesson. One time I got in trouble and I didn't know if I was going to get spanked or not. I don't even think she was a spanker, but I ran upstairs and put a book in my pants as if that would trick her. Michele. I didn't get spanked, but she was definitely like, that's never going to work. She took me to meet Judy Blume. She knew how much I loved to read. The things I remember are she was my mom, and she always was. And she gave us a new family too, with Ben and Dylan and Bob and their families. I've always said, like, I consider them like stepbrothers and a stepfather even. And I wish we could have seen her more in the end, but we were afraid to see her. And the things I remember are her walking in front of me with her grass bag. She had a grass purse, and she'd always walk with it. And she whistled with her teeth. And one of the most important things she's ever said to me was she always wanted to have children, and she couldn't have her own children. But she knew her fate was to have us and you guys. And she said that all the time. So we are family. And I will miss her so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. No surprise that Michele filled an auditorium. This is awesome. It's an honor to be up here in front of everyone, but my name is Drew Rasmussen. I was a deckhand for Bob and Dylan for 7 Dungeness crab seasons. And I may have been underqualified to get that position on deck. Had a season up in Alaska salmon fishing, but that was like summer camp for the guys, you know. I had a lot of ambition, but besides that, I was like, oh, I can cook. And quickly I jumped to the top of the list. But anybody who's actually familiar with the infamous Oregon Dungeness crab season will tell you it is a grueling grind. If you haven't been on the boat, you've heard about it. I mean, they even made a show about it, but spent too much time with the drama outside of what was actually happening. Nonetheless, I had a position on the boat, and boy, long days, 18 hours piece, and didn't know enough about, you know, the engine work to fill that position. Didn't have enough meat on my bones to really be like the brute on the boat. So I was the cook, right? Thank goodness I've learned Michele provides home cooked meals for the opener. Oh, the pressure was off me. It was awesome. So yeah, for about the first 2 weeks, we were eating meatloaf and mashed potatoes, cordon bleu, you name it. She kept us healthy. But and we'd go in to deliver, only had a few hours. She would literally take our sacks of dirty, stinky fisherman laundry, socks and underwear, all of it. She would take it home and get it washed for us if we didn't have the time to do it ourselves. Not only that, but she'd bring another supply of food, stacks and stacks, good portion sizes too. Boy, did I appreciate it. She kept us fed. It really is good for morale. Besides that, I remember first couple times I met her, she just told me, you know, I was like, isn't it hard being on land, like being a wife, a fisherman? not just for a couple of years, not just for a couple of seasons, but for decades. And she told me she always keeps the light on. And I really like that. And it always stuck with me. And not only when I see the lighthouse, but when I see, you know, the city lights in the distance and you're out there getting beat up by the elements, making your way into port or driving past it, look towards the land, you see that glowing light, you know that she's there. And the women that are as tough and as resilient as she is are also there on land with the light on for you. So Michele truly is a lifelong lighthouse keeper. And that's an amazing thing. Another thing she said to me that I always liked, I grew up Irish Catholic, you know, Catholic family in the Midwest, but there's a lot of guilt that goes with Catholicism, right? So now I'm a recovering Catholic. And one thing I always liked about her too, somehow we got on the brief conversation of the afterlife. And she said, you know, Drew, I am of the school of the pleasantly surprised. She just left it at that. So I'm sure she's been pleasantly surprised. But yeah, nonetheless, well, just to follow up, I guess, a little note for Dylan and Bob here. I actually been meaning to tell Dylan this story. I had a dream literally 2 weeks ago, and it was a pretty quick dream, but it was bizarre. I literally pulled up to a local convenience store to grab a 6-pack of beer. And there is, in the parking lot, pulled right up in front, there's a Batmobile, like the modern contemporary Batmobile. Christian Bale probably drove it. Who knows? I was like, what the heck is a Batmobile doing in Newport? Go in to grab my 6-pack of beer, and standing in line is Bob wearing a puffy yellow jacket, like Patagonia, Patagucci jacket, bright yellow. And Dylan is standing in line with him holding the 6-pack, and he's wearing a fur coat. So bizarre. So bizarre. And anyone who knows Dylan, I mean, he's practically a vegetarian. Super bizarre, and bottom line is we all cope with loss in many different ways, but I have never seen anyone buy a Batmobile to cope with their losses. So thank you, Bob, for that. Cheers.
I'm Susan Reese Painter, and I'm one of Michele's lawyer friends. I first met Michele in the mid 1980s, back in the dark ages. She had just started practice, and I'd been in practice about 10 years or so. And it was a horrible rainy day, and I had to drive down from Portland to deal with a motion on a divorce case that Michele was on the other side of. Her client was a jerk, and my client was a whiner. But that's the nature of divorce cases sometimes. She had the better argument and she won, and I was impressed with her professionalism, her graciousness, and we became friends after that. I have a tendency to watch cases when I'm on vacation, and so when my husband and I would come down to Yachats for vacation, we spent some time watching Michele and Steve Lovejoy try the Jones cases in the mid 80s. Michael Jones was a young man who, with his mother, were accused of some altercations with a neighbor. And the cases went on and on and on. And ultimately, Jerry Spence got involved. And he and Michele, mostly with Michele's work, got freedom for Sandy Jones. But in any event, I watched those cases and was, again, impressed with the kind of ability that Michele had and the self-effacing attitudes that she took. And after Jerry Spence, who's a well-known trial attorney in his 90s now, wrote books about that case and another case involving Brandon Mayfield, he gave a little bit of attention to Michele. And I got to review those books, and I'd call Michele and she'd give me the backstory, and I could put some of the things about what really happened in my reviews. The obituary about Michele mentions that Jerry did dedicate one of his books to her, and the obituary doesn't quote what Jerry said. So Jerry's kind of a sexist, and this isn't quite the way I would put it, but his tribute to her in The Smoking Gun reads as follows: to Michele Longo Eder, whose bravery and personhood have proven many times over that one can be a magnificent mother, wife, and trial lawyer, all wrapped up beautifully in one woman. After my husband and I bought a house in Newport, moved down here and started spending a lot of time here, Michele was very gracious and welcoming and accommodating. And I got to know her commitment to the scholarship fund of the Lincoln County Bar Association when I was the treasurer. And she would give generous donations every year for the benefit of youngsters in the community interested in legal careers. And I was really impressed with what she did for our group. I'll never forget the time that my sister-in-law was struggling with the death of her son. And I went by Michelle's office to get a copy of her book. And Michele sat down and talked to me about what it was like 9 years after her son had died, and gave me some words that I could pass along to my sister-in-law about how to deal with it, and how even after the first few years, the grief keeps on going. Michele spoke at a couple of groups that I'd asked her to speak at, and was always very generous with her time and her wisdom. When she and I had our last lunch together, which I didn't realize was going to be our last lunch before she got really sick, I remember that we spent so much time talking that we both took our lunches home in her to-go boxes because we never got around to eating. And afterwards, I sent her a book list and she sent me some book lists. And that was the kind of friendship that we had. We could never stop talking and sharing. And when she wrote to me to tell me that she had stage 4 cancer, she said, "I've had a wonderful life. I'm well loved. I'm safe." And then she talked very much about me and my cancer journeys, and how she appreciated my keeping on working and that kinds of thing, and those kinds of things. And then when she wrote and said that she'd like to have, as a Christmas present, people writing memories about her so that her grandkids would have memories of her from people who'd been with her and known her longer than they've had the opportunity to do. I wrote the following to Michele. "You're a wonderful, wonderful example of a conscientious, take no prisoners, creative advocate who is also warm, feminine, articulate, and strong. It's a joy to be your friend, and I've been privileged to have you as a colleague. Newport has become so much richer through all you have been and done here. We all love you."
Hey, my name is Nathan Ball, and I've had the real joy and honor and gift of getting to grow up in community with you guys, with Ben and with Dylan and with Bob and Michele. And I didn't prepare anything in advance, but I certainly felt inspired to make sure there was a steady flow of people coming through sharing what we feel. She brings that out. And will continue to, inspiration to action and a desire to feel in touch with the depth and wonder and joy that there is in the world. I felt Michele's presence growing up deeply, primarily through getting to be friends with Dylan and through deeply admiring Ben and feeling amazed and just this joy of getting to be inquisitive about the world, following along with the way Ben lived, and getting to feel interested in the world and going on adventures with Dylan and struggle through challenging homework and make it through high school challenges together. And one of the things that popped into my mind as I sat down was, as I'm getting more in touch with other aspects of Michele's incredible life and the person who she was and is, a memory popped up of one time when I came to help out unloading the hold full of crab with you guys. It was just for a single 8-hour shift, and it was a profoundly humbling experience for me. I hadn't done work like that before in my life. And it really, we're in port, right? It's the boats at the dock. We're not at sea. It's not 18-hour days in some sea state with horrible weather. That made a big impact on me. And it really opened up an appreciation for the immense capacity that your family holds in this tremendously challenging but fulfilling work, and in life. And Bob, you're a tremendously understated individual, but it's always provided a wonderful counterpart to Michelle's more overt vibrance. But it is in no what I was feeling in touch with is how well met each of you were in partnership, and how your incredible depth of capacity for life and love together reflects each other back and forth. That was, laid bare as we grieved together after Ben was lost. And it was so inspiring and touching the way that you all embraced that experience and responded by continuing to live so fully. And that's something that I'm going to continue to feel, and feel gratitude for, and feel inspiration from, in this new configuration of family. But I feel so much joy and gratitude for getting to be together in life with you, and glad for Michelle's presence. And it's really special to get to appreciate all that she's brought. Thank you.
Hey everyone, hope you'll forgive me for reading. I'm not really very good at winging it, and I wanted to make sure I got a few points across without stumbling on myself. My name is Marley. I'm Bob and Michelle's nephew. My earliest memories of Michelle are during trips my brother and I would take every year up to Newport, a couple times a year, usually for her birthday on the 4th and Christmas. I don't remember a time we didn't, and probably started around 8 or 9 years old for me. My earliest memories of her were in the kitchen making breakfast, whether it was microwavable Oscar Mayer bacon, which was forbidden in my inconsistently Jewish household where bacon was an inexplicable casualty, or other delicacies like Dungeness crab quiche and a variety of other seafood I'd never seen before. She always knew what my interests were, and every year she chose things for me that would always speak to me. She knew what books I loved, even if I didn't know that I would, what games I wanted to play, what movies I wanted to see, but I hadn't. I always felt like she knew me in ways other people didn't. And I always felt like I was an individual when I was around her instead of a kid. Every time it came time to leave, I would always cry. And on one memorable occasion, my mom is never going to let me forget. I tearfully told her upon arriving back in LA that I wish that Auntie Michelle was my mommy. Obviously, it wasn't the bacon in the presents. So it wasn't the bacon in the presents that made me feel this way, even though, kid version of me thought it was pretty cool. For as long as I knew her, she genuinely wanted to know other people and meet them wherever they were, where they were coming from. I never felt like I was a chore to her, and she didn't, she always wanted to hear what I had to say. She took an interest in me, and through so many patient conversations full of love and insight, whenever I went up to Newport, I felt like I was a real person that was seen instead of a responsibility. I feel like there are parts of myself that were latent, that were illuminated and nurtured by her thoughtful questions and the time that she took to let me be a person. And I love her so much for how loved, actualized, and empowered I felt like when I was with her. As I've been thinking about it the past couple of months, there's a bunch of stuff that's come to mind. I remember playing tennis with her and how her serve cooked me basically every time. Her infectious laugh and how her eyes would crinkle and slightly water at the corners. How honest and authentic she was with her opinions and feelings, and how they were so close to the surface, as close to laughing as crying a lot of the time without being self-conscious about how raw or vulnerable that could be. Her cooking and outrageously good chicken enchiladas, for sure. Her mastery of what to me seems like a totally antiquated art form, just writing letters. Her emails, notes, and cards always seem to be so rich and full and approachably conversational and personal. I remember her mercilessly whooping my ass a bunch of times at Scrabble when I was a kid, which led to a lifelong passion for the game. And when I was in grad school and I thought I was fancy, I challenged her to Words at Friends, and she did it again. She asked Bob in their final days that she wanted me to play something, but didn't say what. So I was thinking about her last night, and I came up with this.
Hi, I'm Nikki Gaither. I'm gonna hope that my baby's gonna cooperate with me during this. But Michele stood up for me, and I'm gonna stand up for her. So Dylan and Bob are like family to me. Went to school with Dylan, and we became really close through the tragic loss of Ben and then my mom too soon. And so after that, really, Michele stepped in a major way to be a mom in my life. And I think my favorite story of hers is shortly after college for me. I had a job that was like my dream job, but my boss was really awful. She belittled me and told me I was weak, and she really intimidated me. And I didn't want to leave because I loved the job, but I eventually got the strength to realize I couldn't stay. And so I decided to leave, and I caught word that she was going to try to take some money out of something she'd already paid me for. And I didn't know what to do, but I knew it was wrong. And so I called Michele. And even though Michele worked full time and obviously had her hands involved in mothering so many, she took the time to call me and to talk through my handbook and to walk through how I could defend myself. And when my boss came into my office and presented me with a paper to sign to tell me to hand over some money, I stood up to her and I told her no because of Michele. And she was mad and baffled and left. And Michele gave me so much more than money that day. She gave me an enormous sense of pride and strength. And she's done that for so many people, and there are generations that will feel the impact from all that Michele has given and shared. Her presence, I don't feel like she's gone. I feel like she's still here. She's just one of those larger than life people that can't be gone. She's going to live through us forever as we continue to honor her legacy. So I love you guys so much. I absolutely love Michele and always will. Yeah, that's all.
Hi, my name's Leah. I didn't plan on speaking, but here I am. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm 40. Dylan and I are the same age. That's how I know this family. I ran cross country with Ben. That's how I met Ben. And then at the end of Ben's life, we were neighbors in Eugene. When I met Michele, I spent a lot of time at their kitchen table learning from this family, and it was very different than my own. And it would probably be an understatement to say that Michele was probably pretty concerned about me. I was pretty much underfed, uneducated, and very religious. So she gave me some books that she thought I should read. And one was a dictionary, which I still have with a special inscription side. So I have a lot of happy memories from that time. Someone was talking about the writing and the emails and her sign off. So I just want to share this last email I got from Michele. Obviously she helped so many people and she was involved and cared about so many people, but in September she emailed me and this was her sign off. Kind of makes me chuckle. I know I sound so serious. Just remember, if you think, this is capitalized, you need an attorney, 99% of the time you do, exclamation. Love you, Michele.
Hi, I'm Jenny Goblersh, and I just wanted to share my favorite memory of Michele. She and I have been through the trenches for many years together. But the year that Fishermen's Wives decided to do major fundraising for our memorial at the park, at the state park, somebody came up with a brilliant idea of raffling off a pickup truck, brand new Ford F-150 or whatever. So the guys at the auto place said, sure, just sign here. So I signed, figured we'd raise the money, no problem. Before that though, I had called Michele just to make sure that was all right. Can we, as a nonprofit, do a raffle like that? And she said, go for it. Don't worry about it. So we did. I signed the papers and we start fundraising. Then some guy came up to me and said, well, how did you get permission to do this or get a license to do this? And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, well, you're a nonprofit, right? Yeah. Well, I think there's some pretty strict laws about that. And I went, oh, well, we have an attorney. We have it all taken care of. Went right back to my office, picked up the phone, called Michele and said, Michele, check out go to your books and look up racketeering. And she said, oh shit, hung up. And she took care of it. We ended up paying a fine or something. I think we lost our treasurer over it. But the rest of us just thought it was great. It was just funny as hell. And the fine wasn't much. She fell on her sword over it. And it all worked out just fine. And the biggest fish buyer in the county ended up winning the truck, but that's okay.
So I'm Bob Cowan. I'm the director here at Hatfield. And it was in this capacity professionally that I was first meeting Michele. And I had heard prior to that how respected she was by the community, and just looking out at this community, the Newport, the coast, the university representation, the state, it's really pretty amazing. And what I actually found when I met her was a very person who wanted to give a very open and honest friendship. And I really respected that. She offered a lot of counsel, and she asked for counsel, whether she needed it or not. I don't think so, but it was a very give and take type of situation. I also found her to be extremely compassionate. And the one brief story there is we served on the search for our university president, our newest one. And we had some listening sessions with students and staff around the university. And at this one particular one that both Michele and I were at, it was very, very emotional. There a lot of students and staff were feeling that they hadn't been heard for a long time, and they were giving out. And Michele not only was listening as was I, but she managed to sort of summarize what they said and even more eloquently than they were. And it was such a moving moment, but it showed this depth of her compassion. You know, another word that I sort of think about with her is that she is very supportive. She was very supportive of Hatfield. She's very supportive of the coast. And she would represent that in her role as on the board of trustees. But she wanted to know what the university could do for the coast, but she also wanted to know what the coast could do for the university. And that give and take, I thought was always pretty impressive to me. You know, I think from what we're hearing and what we've seen and what we all know, she lived her life really well. And that's great. And that's something to always take with you. Was she a pillar of this community? Absolutely. But I will remember her, I think, most as basically the soul of the coast. Thanks.
Hi, Chris Carley here. And I know Michele, and I loved having her. I could call her because years and years and years ago, I had two little boys who rode on my school bus. Hi, Dylan. Nathan, hi. So I had two little squirrely boys running around on that bus, and little did they know, hey, Michele. The next morning, I had two beautifully beautifully written letters of apology. So nice to see you again. Miss your brother.
Hi, can you hear me? Is it on? It's on. Okay. I'm Claudia Schlossberg. I'm not from this community, from Newport. I live in Washington, D.C., but I grew up with Michele. It's really hard I wasn't planning to speak, but I could hear Michele saying, oh, come on, Claudia, get up there. You can do it. We grew up on McKinley Drive together. I knew Michele from 5th grade on. You could all say it started on McKinley Drive. When I hear the stories and the memories and your thoughts and your love for Michele and how you talk about her fierceness, her courage, her compassion, her sense of fun, her humor, and that take no prisoner attitude. Well, I can tell you, I vouch that was there when she was 10 years old. I also want to recognize there's, people who couldn't make it. I think they're on the Zoom. Her brother, Mark, her dear friends, Eric and Zoe and Lisa and Stephen and Sally, who's here, came from Hawaii. Michele had a very big community and people who loved her. She and I had a very special relationship. I'm also a lawyer. And I think we just forged that spirit as very youthful. I can tell there are many stories I have, many of them probably I can't tell because we were rule breakers. We did a lot of things we shouldn't have done, many things we shouldn't have done, things we got in trouble for. But a couple of things I can talk about. I think we were 12 and we were babysitters. That's how, we could make a little cash. And at that time, I think it was probably 1965 or 66, something like that. We made 50 cents an hour, 50 cents an hour. I know all these young mothers here are going, what? But Michele and I didn't think that was enough. I was like, well, we not only babysit, but we do your dishes, we put up with your kids. So we organized ourselves and basically went on strike and told all the parents in the neighborhood that we weren't going to work for 50 cents anymore. We wanted 75 cents an hour. And we got it. So Michele knew how to put those arguments together. She knew how to, that winning argument. There were many other funny moments and things we did together, but we often said, we kind of drove each other, made each other who we were. And we didn't always stay in touch. There were periods of time that we were not together. But when we did get together, and the last time I got to see Michele in person was in 2019, when she and I flew to Indianapolis to surprise our friend Zoe at her birthday. But we always said it was like there was no time, but lost between us, that we were, it was just a connection. And I really had to be here because it's very hard to say goodbye to my friend Michele because she's so much a part of me. And even though she's not physically present, she will always be a part of me, just as she will always be a part of this community. So thank you. Love you, Bob.
So I too felt Michelle's elbow telling me to pop up and say a few words, as she knows it's not my thing that I naturally like to do. My name's Jennifer Schock Stevenson. I grew up in a fishing family, so I've always known Michele. So thankfully, I never had the quality of being too intimidated. It just was a natural relationship that evolved. But definitely during different stages, I knew her from being a teenager at her house, or as an adult working with her on the helo, which was great fun. For sure, the learning curve was steep. We came as prepared as we could for all of our meetings, which usually meant we emailed, flew together, made a plan, which often was 1 was going to be a bad cop and 2 were going to be a good cop. And Ginny and I were the good cops. So that was our argument strategy for all of our meetings typically. And they went well. Besides, we can't tell them this and we can say this. So definitely pushed so many people to grow. I think that's her biggest contribution for me. But I miss our scandalous lunches. Ginny, Michele, and I, hoping no one was listening and giggling. But I know that I will still see her and Ben in my garden, grow lilies for Michele and yellow roses for Ben. So thank you.
I'm Dylan.
Michelle's my mom, and I want to say thank you for being here to everybody. It's a really special event. I was by my mom's side a lot as she was in her last couple of weeks. You know, she was dying for 3 years, but in the end, we could tell it was getting close. So I spent as much time as I could, but I felt really helpless, as we all do. And I thought maybe I could write some poems for my mom that might make her feel a tiny bit better, if possible, about dying. So I'm going to try to read one. One of them's in the program, and then there's a few more that are on papers. I put some out in the foyer. This one's called My Mom. So these are addressed to her. It's a little awkward addressing them to you. Like, I feel like I should look at her picture. You are my mom now and forever, even after you slip off to laugh with much missed family and to sit with old friends in the garden of dreams. You are my mom today while I weep and read you this poem, and also in May when your roadies burst with color and I smile for both of us. You are my mom squeezing me as I squeeze my children, and they carry your spirit too. For you are with us while we breathe and live and touch the earth. However strong I need to be, I am, just as you taught me. Wherever we go, you're my mom forever. Thank you, guys.
The soul of the coast. I think that said everything. That touched me, Bob. I'm David Gomberg. It's my honor to represent this community in our Oregon legislature. And as that journey has unfolded, I often consider the fact that before I got a phone call asking me to run, those people called Michele first. It's true. And in the years since then, I've often considered how our communities might have been better or different had she said yes instead of saying no. And of course, she called me all the time to let me know how we could do things better or different. Michele was a remarkable advocate for her family, for her industry, for her community, for our state, for social justice, for economic justice, a remarkable advocate. And you heard words earlier tonight about her work to keep the Coast Guard Air Station here. I remember that hearing. I remember her at that hearing. But nobody mentioned her more recent work in the last year to address the challenge of wind energy and how that might affect the fishing fleet here in Newport. We've heard talk about her work in the courts, which I admired so much. And we very briefly touched on her work on the Oregon State University Board of Governors. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that this building would not be here, and we wouldn't be here in this building were it not for her efforts on that front. A remarkable advocate. On a much more personal level, I will tell you that that cancer has darkened the Gomberg's door in the past year, and Michele took time during her challenges to offer us encouragement and comfort and advice as well, and I have valued that so very much. And I look around this room and I see the faces of all the people that she touched, but there's another measure, and that is the people whose lives she touched and improved that may not even know her name, but the difference that she made in this community as an advocate for all of us. And it's times like this that I think of the words of Tom McCall, who once famously said that heroes are not giant statues framed against a red sky, but they are ordinary, everyday people who say it's my community and my responsibility to make a difference. Michele certainly wasn't ordinary, but she was one of those heroes. And I would say to you that a grand lady has left us, but she's left us with a very great deal. Thank you.
Hey, I'm Ellen Anderson. I'm Jessica's mom and the other grandma to Lark and August. And I just have a short story about the first time I met Michele. So my daughter, about 13, 14 years ago, moved down to the coast to be with Dylan. And I came down for a visit. And now, of course, I know to the punchline, this is a beautiful community. But as I pulled in on 101 and saw what was available there, I really kind of wondered where she chosen to live. I went down to her house and over by Nye Beach, and she went to kind of show me some of the sites in Newport. The first place was Nye Beach. We weren't a block out of the house, I think taking Buey for a walk. And 2 cars had stopped and one person had stopped to talk to her. And I started to get a sense of, wow, this is a really loving, beautiful community. And then we're walking to go get a coffee. And then I hear this holler down, Jessica! We turn around and Michele's arms wide open and she's running from her office, wraps Jessica up in a bear hug. And then I was introduced to her and I got a hug. That's my first memory of her.
I think I will repeat what Drew spoke about, and that is the reception that you people have provided for Michele and her family. This is impressive. Very impressive. You can tell I'm from an older generation. I have to work from paper, not from a cell phone. And I have to read rather than speak off my cuff as I usually would. I wish not to make mistakes. My name is Jim Hanselman. I'm a friend and a neighbor of Bob and Michele's. My wife is Joanne Ronseal. She wrote an article for the paper yesterday. You may have read it. A farewell to Michele Longo, Eder. We met Michele in the mid-90s. We had purchased a house in Newport in 1990, and it would eventually become our retirement home. But until that, it was a long-term rental. We lived in Michigan. We were school teachers. But we would come each summer to do maintenance on the home and enjoy Newport, learn our future community, and re-rent the house if it were empty. And if it happened to be vacant for that summer, then Joanne and I would move in and camp. Well, this is how we met Michele. One morning, we observed a peeping Tom, also known as Peeping Michele, pressed against one of our front windows, peering in to see what was going on. Joanne, the gregarious one of us, went outside immediately, walked towards the woman and said, "Can we help you?" "Busted!" was the response that she gave. She then informed us that she also was a neighbor. That was also interesting. We sat and chatted, and either from her embarrassment of being caught or our stellar personalities, she invited us to dinner that evening. When we arrived for dinner, she led us to the kitchen, a place where cauldrons were boiling on the stove. Over on the counter, a huge salad bowl filled. And then I saw in the corner a homemade apple pie. It drew my attention. She sat us at the table. She introduced us to Bob, to Dylan, and Ben. That was excellent. Joanne and I being teachers, 2 teenage boys, this is going to work. So about that time, this larger stainless steel bushel basket lands in the center of the kitchen table, steaming with legs sticking up all over out of it. These are Dungeness crabs, something I knew of. I'm a biologist, but I had never consumed. And I thought, this is interesting. So Michele started to serve salad and then crabs. And 2 halves landed upon my plate and everyone else's plate, it seemed. Now, I'm not familiar with this creature, and I'm trying to figure out, how do I deconstruct a crab? I was clueless. I also didn't know what the etiquette was. Do you just dive in? But Dylan and Ben saved me 2 hungry teenagers. All you need to do is watch them, and we will reverse my profession of teaching. I will become the student. So I just imitate and mimic Ben and Dylan, and the crabs slowly disappear. And I'm feeling good because my mom taught me to always clear my plate and always eat what the hostess puts in front of you. So I was furiously eating at these crabs, and I'd get 1 half done and I'd be halfway done and another half would land on the plate. This went on. By the end of the evening, this little guy, had eaten 2 crabs. I was an embarrassment to all, including myself. I thought that was not good, Jim. That's not what a guest does. But it was all right with Michele. She looked at me, sent me a huge smile, and then she set down a slice of pie in front of me. I decided I was okay. Memorable? Absolutely. It's like yesterday. We left to go home that evening. Michele grabs us by the arm, hands me 2 of those Tupperware containers that would normally go with the boat, loaded with crab, and a 3rd one loaded with apple pie. And off we went. Typical Michele. Send people home with food. Send them home filled and happy. As I walked home, I know I said to myself repeatedly, I got to make that woman a friend. 5 years ago, I was in Michigan to do a eulogy for my father's best friend. I logged into email very early one Saturday morning, and there was an email from an EMT, and Joanne's name was on the subject line. I did not recognize it. I was hesitant to open it, but I did. And I had learned that the EMT person had been called to our house at midnight. Joanne had fallen down the stairs, landed on a ceramic tile floor, and shattered her right femur. Made worse because she had a titanium stem from a hip replacement inside that femur. It was in 11 pieces. I was scared. I panicked. It's 6 o'clock in Michigan. It's 3 o'clock in Oregon. So I called the hospital and I find out that Joanne has been sent to Portland to the Emmanuel Legacy trauma surgery ward because it's too badly broken. At 3 a.m., I am not going to call Bob and Michele, and they are my best chance of getting some information. So I wait 2 hours, 3 hours, and I'm sitting there tapping my foot, waiting for the clock to hit 6. That's a reasonable hour to call Michele. So I do. Michele answers. I quickly explain to her the email I got, and she immediately says, nobody should have to go there alone. Talk to Bob. She hands the phone to Bob, and I explain to Bob in a few words what has happened. He collects information, and in less than 3 minutes, I can hear in the background, Bob, I'm off to Portland. Tell Jim. I could not have been more comforted than by those words from Michele. When you're 2,700 miles away from your loved one and you can't do anything, it is difficult. But as Dylan has so eloquently said in his poem that's in the program, Michele is the person you want standing next to you or behind you. For Michele, a problem seen is a problem tackled. That's what she does. She immediately went to Portland, took care of Joanne's entry into the hospital. Joanne doesn't even remember this. We argued about this as I typed it. But she was so drugged, she doesn't remember much. Sorry, babe. While Michelle's there in Portland, knowing she can't stay the whole time because Joanne's surgery has been moved to Tuesday, when the surgery team, the trauma surgery team, will be prepared to do surgery. So Michele reaches out to Kim, her bestie, who lives in that area. Kim shows up at the hospital when Michele can't be there. And when Joanne finally awoke from surgery on Tuesday, once again, there stood Michele at her bedside. For the 2 weeks that Joanne had to stay at that hospital, Kim remained a visitor and a contact. We knew Kim briefly. They got to know each other much better. A little more than 3 years ago, Bob and Michele disclosed her diagnosis. What stood out at that time was her determination to make memories with those 2 grandchildren. There was nothing more important. There were other goals: to enjoy life to the fullest, to spend time with Bob. But those grandchildren were the heart of her strategy. And you know, all of you know, that anytime she spoke of those kids, she beamed. It was the real drive in her life to watch those grandkids grow. So with her time limited, they made plans. That too is Michele. She never goes without a plan. And they set upon that plan. A few times in the last few weeks, Bob would ask me to spell him for an hour or so that he could take care of some family business and get a break. It's hard being a caretaker for your loved one. Many of you are familiar with that. Some of us have not had that journey yet. Mostly, Michele was quiet and asleep. Occasionally, she'd open her eyes, scan the room. And when she did, she would see me, not Bob. And I feared what she might think. But it was okay. I didn't alarm her. And she would close her eyes and go back to sleep. It was reassuring to me that I could sit there with her and not alarm her. You don't want to do that to a dear friend. On Sunday, March 12th, Bob asked me to come and again sit with Michele so that he could go to breakfast with the kids. I gladly jumped at that opportunity. I arrived, Bob gave Michele her medicines, and then he suggested we check her vitals. She seemed to be resting fairly easily. So we stepped to her bed, one on each side of her bed. We put monitors on her fingers. Bob leaned in closely. We checked her pulse, her oxygen content of her blood, and things were just fine. And she opened her eyes. She raised her head. And her eyes, well, these were huge, big, smiling, dazzling eyes, shooting sparks out of them, if it were possible. I have seldom seen eyes as bright as that. And they were focused right on Bob. And though she didn't smile, her eyes did, as our eyes can. And then she slowly closed her eyes. And all went quiet. She was gone. Bob and I looked at each other, not comprehending what had just happened. We checked the meter, which said no oxygen, no pulse. We both are checking for pulse. He's leaning to her mouth to hopefully feel breath coming out. And there is nothing. Nothing but silence. I had thought at one time that that was a possibility if I were there. And I didn't really want that to happen while I was there. I'm not family. I'm a friend. I hope a good friend. But then it did happen. And it is one of the more memorable events in my life to watch a person who I respect and care for so much slip away to the next life. That video runs in a loop in my head. I imagine it runs in Bob's head. It's inescapable for me. And the first time I was sure that she was focused on Bob. She loved him so. But in the weeks and days that have passed since she has, a new interpretation comes to me every now and then. It wants to fight its way into my mind. I know not if it's true, but for many of you who know her religious beliefs, and they've been mentioned earlier, is that perhaps those big, smiling, dazzling eyes was her standing at the steps of the Church of the Pleasantly Surprised. I don't know which. Both would be fine with me. Losses like Michele move us deeply. They shake us to our core. Whereas I thought the last chapter for Michele and me was over, I realize that Michele is not finished with me. She is not finished with many of you. Our memories of her will remind us of what an individual can do, what an individual can accomplish, and the amount of good that one individual can spread. That is a lesson that we all can follow. So I find myself again coming to embrace my favorite author's advice. Michele was a true bookworm. I am not. My favorite writer is a guy by the name of Theodore Geisel. He wrote, "Don't cry that it's over. Smile that it happened." Thank you, Dr. Seuss. Thank you, Michele Longo Eder.
My name is Alan Eder. I'm Bob's younger brother. His much younger brother, thank you. Thank you all for being here today. So many great things have already been said about Michele. I'm going to be touching on some of the same themes. But before I do, I just wanted to say that there's been a tremendous outpouring of love and support for Bob, losing his longtime partner. Phone calls, texts, emails, letters, that old-fashioned thing, you know. And I know from talking to him frequently that he's spent a lot of time responding to every single one because he's that kind of thoughtful human being. Everybody's important. One of those communications was on his refrigerator when I arrived in town a few days ago, and he shared it with us, and we'd like to share it with you now. It's from a gentleman named Ed Ray. And it's handwritten in a script that's shaky, so you know this took some effort to do. Dear Bob, I am so sorry that Michele has passed away. My thoughts and prayers are with you and all of your loved ones. There are no words to compensate for such a loss, and there is no closure. Life is different from now on. Having lost my wife 9 years ago this month, I can share some perspective with you that I hope will help. At some point, you will realize that you are not the person you were before you met Michele. You will realize that you have taken on some of the qualities you loved most in her. Consequently, she has made you a better person. In a real way, she will always be with you. How blessed you both were to be together for so many years. Thank you, Ed. And here's what I have to add. Live well, die well. That's really all there is to it. Michele did both. Throughout her life, she touched the lives of so many people and in so many positive ways. As her time drew nigh, she stoically prepared herself and those around her as best she could for her imminent departure from the bounds of the body. Thinking about Michele brings to mind many of the outstanding attributes present in my own pantheon of role models. Here are the top 10. Please note, only 3 of these role models are actual people. 1, Kwai Chang Caine is the central character of the 1970s television show Kung Fu, portrayed by David Carradine. Anybody know that show? Yes. Beautiful. I'm not speaking to the uninitiated then. Caine is a man of peace, never acts out of anger, is always aware, intuitive, present, and devoted to making the world a more just and peaceful place. He exudes great love and respect for all living things. Caine is a master of the precisely metered use of force, using his kung fu for defensive purposes only, and just the amount called for, never any more than that. I often ask myself, what would Caine do? 2, Godzilla. Because the more people try to defeat him or destroy him for being who he is, the more he becomes what he is. 3, horses. Because they are magnificent and at once both calming and intimidating. Fingers don't fail me now. 4, Volker Strabel, my boss, the dean of the Herb Alpert School of Music at Cal Arts where I work, because he is an enlightened leader of the future who truly appreciates those he works with and makes sure they know it. And I learned that from Michele long before I met Volker. Volker believes in the essential goodness of humanity, seeks it out in others, and finds it. 5, Shelley the Wonder Dog, my guru. For her inspirational physicality, her deep affection, and her staunch loyalty. She was a friend to all, unless, that is, she saw you as a threat to someone dear to her. 6, the ocean, because it is inspirational in its apparent limitlessness. And like horses, the ocean is beautiful, strangely familiar and reassuring, yet imposing and potentially terrifying all at the same time. 7, Maximus is the central character in the movie Gladiator, portrayed by Russell Crowe. He is a true warrior, fighting for his family, his country, and his own survival. He is a farmer soldier, a mighty general with strong ties to the soil. He is a genuine leader who knows how to forge effective teams capable of prevailing, even against all odds. 8, the Vikings, The Mariner Warriors from Scandinavia of 1,000 years ago, that is, not the football team from Minnesota. What can I say? They were down with death. Their warrior culture saw death as the rite of passage to a glorious continuation of their existence, even a fulfillment of it. Because they weren't afraid of dying, they weren't afraid of living either, and they lived life with great gusto and were formidable opponents. 9, George Washington. So amazing was the father of our country that one needs to remember he actually was a living, breathing person. Washington was the American Maximus, a farmer turned soldier, a great general who led a ragtag army to do what they themselves didn't know they were capable of doing, and what the rest of the world thought they surely could not do, which was to defeat one of the superpowers of the day, the British. 10, and finally, my late great sister-in-law, Michele Longo Eder, because she brought together all of these lofty attributes into one singular individual. I know for a fact that I am not alone in having her as a role model. I am honored to have been related to her through my brother Bob, another great role model, who, like Michele, is also quite exceptional. In fact, Bob is so special that he is worthy of having been Michele's mate. If you haven't already read Michele's book, Salt in Our Blood, the memoir of a fisherman's wife, a treasure awaits you. It is an epic story on par with Ken Kesey's Sometimes a Great Notion, and all the more compelling because it is nonfiction. When I asked Michele how many edits she made of her original journal writings for Salt in the Blood, she said just a handful. Nearly all of it was verbatim as she wrote it at the time these things happened. Compared to my own laborious writing process, that is nothing short of astonishing. Salt in Our Blood is the greatest existing chronicle of any chapter in the history of our family. We have only a vague sense of any relative earlier than our grandparents, but thanks to Michele, future generations will be forever familiar with the story of Robert Eder and his family, replete with challenges met, towering successes, and the most poignant of tragedies. It is a select and distinguished group of people that have had boats named after them. Bob and his elder son, Ben, transformed the fishing vessel Argos, which you saw on the slideshow, and rechristened it as the Michele Ann in honor of the woman whose life we celebrate today. Among those who share the distinction of having had a vessel named after them, I don't know if any of the others on that list have also had a dog named after them. Michele did, and not just any dog either, but Shelley the Wonder Dog. When the time came to get a family dog, our sons Moses and Marley, who you heard earlier, were just young lads. Moses has always been a dog whisperer, and despite a few strikes against her, he chose a black lab mix from the dog pound. She'd been called Lady by her previous people. Moses's instincts were, of course, spot on. She was a wonderful addition to our family, just like Michele was. When we came home with her, we marked the transition by giving her a new name, like what happened in the case of the reborn fishing vessel. In the interest of continuity, I suggested that we find a name that, like Lady, also had 2 syllables and ended in the letter Y. Moses and Marley immediately hit upon Shelley, the affectionate nickname of their beloved Aunt Michele. Why? I distinctly remember them explaining that it is because you can always tell that Shelley really loves you a lot, and when the time comes, she will fiercely defend you. I'll wrap this up by saying that, to be sure, it is sad to lose anyone, but most especially someone who has meant so much to so many. Just look around you right now for the proof of that, and who left the world a far, far better place than she found it. Try to imagine what the world might be like if billions of people followed Michelle's stellar example and sought to improve the world like she did. It boggles the mind in the most beautiful ways. What a wonderful world. There, we snuck it in after all. Michele once laughingly told me that she was going to start a new church. You've heard about this, the Church of the Pleasantly Surprised. The premise for this newfound belief community would be that she didn't know if there was a God or if there was a soul, but if it turned out that these things did in fact exist, she would be, well, pleasantly surprised. Hence the name of the church and my suggestion for a logo, a bulbous exclamation mark, and in the dot at the bottom, a smiley face. Surprise! One of the greatest honors ever bestowed upon me was when, in the immediate aftermath of Ben's sudden death, Michele turned to me and said that if she ever has to dive into a foxhole, she hopes to find me there. I feel the same way about you, Michele, and know that you are waiting in that foxhole in the great beyond for me, for Bob and Dylan, August and Lark, and all these other good people when we eventually kick up some dirt on our way in to join you. You are a warrior's warrior, an army of one, and we are all so proud and blessed and grateful to have shared a bit of this sweet life with you. Thank you.
On behalf of the family, I just want to say thank you for all of the stories and all of the love shown to Michele today, and thank you for being here. If you still have things you want to share or stories you want the grandkids to know, please write those down and send them to the family. An email address and address is on the back of the program. And speaking of the grandkids, watching them play throughout the last several hours today was just so important to Michele that they remember her. And so while they have been here and listening to all the stories, they're still very young. And so I thought before we leave this room today and head out to the lobby for some fabulous seafood that Fishermen's Wives and Local Ocean has put together, let's show the grandkids how much their grandmother loved them. So let's all make our hands into a heart. And with that, let's give a few moments for the family to kind of get up and get ready to leave and exit. And we have some fabulous food waiting. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It was very important to the family today that you all be here. Thank you very much.
Every woman, child, and man who has